So again we are studying Aerodynamics by John D. Anderson, the best book in India at present. Actually not in India, in the world I have come across for the undergraduate as well as graduate students. This is the best book. So we were studying about stability. Stability can be defined in two terms. Stability, actually what I mean to say, is about equilibrium. Now if you are talking about a body which is not in motion, of course for them gaining stability or equilibrium is very easy, but what we are talking about stability here is equilibrium when body is in motion. So there are two types of equilibrium basically. One is dynamic equilibrium, okay, one is dynamic equilibrium, and the other one is static equilibrium, okay, static equilibrium. So when do we apply dynamic and when do we apply static equilibrium? So dynamic equilibrium is applied when body is in motion, okay, when body is in motion. However, static equilibrium is applied when body is in rest, okay. So these are where the same thing. No, only the difference is in one aspect the body is at rest and the other aspect the body is in motion, okay. So you must understand that in one aspect the body is in rest and another aspect the body is in motion. However, equilibrium itself says that when the body is in stability, that time what happens is all the laws of motions are followed. As such, you can understand Newton's first law. It simply says that a body tends to be in the state of rest or in motion unless and until acted upon by an internal agent. There itself we come across dynamic equilibrium. But this is in very much contrast, because what does dynamic equilibrium says? It says that body is in equilibrium, it's stable, but it is moving. Static, okay, it's not, it's in rest. Anything that is in rest, of course it will be stable. Now Newton's laws and aerodynamic laws are not always in contrast, because if we can understand, these are the same laws which governs physics. Aircraft is also something that is governed by physics itself. So we will try to find out some similarities or common points on which aerodynamics and Newton's laws of motion works. Because if we keep on talking about how Newton's laws of motion and aerodynamics are in contrast, it will be difficult for an aerial vehicle to have motion and remain stable. So it's better we'll talk about dynamic equilibrium. Anything that is in dynamic equilibrium means body is in motion but is in equilibrium also, because means that simply says that once you make sure that the body is in motion but is in equilibrium, it simply says that the body is moving but is stable, so that results in the continuous motion of the body. So that is dynamic equilibrium. So for any body to have a continuous motion, dynamic equilibrium is very important. So for dynamic equilibrium, this leads to actually continuous motion of the body, okay, continuous motion of the body. However, static equilibrium, this leads to the body at rest and there is no motion, okay, there is no motion in the body. There is no motion in the body. However, in dynamic equilibrium, the body is in continuous motion. However, for both, if we can say algebraically, sum of f of x is always equals to 0. Here also sum of f of y is also equals to 0. And here also sum of f z equals to 0. That simply says that this results into sum of net force, that is the F net is always equals to 0, okay, the net force is also always equals to 0. Here also the things remains always like this. Summation of f of x equals to 0, summation of f of y equals to 0, summation of f of z equals to 0. Okay, and there itself it leads to summation of f equals to 0, that is f net is always equals to 0. F net is always equals to 0. So this is very important, that how does f net become 0. Now f net for body at rest is very simple, no force, no motion, so everything remains 0. But for this calculation, f of x equals to 0, f of y equals to 0, and f of z equals to 0, this becomes little difficult for us. Now how to do such calculations? For these calculations itself, whole of the aerodynamics was involved. Okay, aerodynamics was actually for these such calculations where we need to make the net forces in all the three axes 0, so that our body can achieve dynamic equilibrium, aerodynamics was invented. So as far as I understand, whoever is watching this video, I will suggest very sincerely that please follow each and every video, so that you can understand these in a very better way. Because if you are following one of the video and you are not following another video, it becomes difficult. So it's better you follow each and every video by video, so that you will have always a continuous involvement with me. If you have any doubts, please leave the comments there, and in case if you want other topics to be explained which you are finding difficult, please leave a comment in the comment box. I will surely go through it in great detail. So here we are now in discussing aerodynamics, f of x, f of y, f of z. Now what I am saying is summation is always 0, f net must be 0 for body to achieve dynamic equilibrium. It's basically saying for body to achieve any type of equilibrium, let it be static, let it be dynamic, the net force on the body should always be 0. Now this is very difficult. You know what, when a body, you can imagine when a body is air bound, that is, it is in the mid air, these parameters to be 0, it becomes very difficult. How to make it 0? Because there are many types of forces acting on the body. There are viscous force, there is drag, there is thrust, there is lift, there are enormous number of forces, and very important, you are talking in the fluid, that is a 3D space, that is not a two-dimensional. If you have a two-dimensional conditions, it is little easier. Why? Because you need to balance the forces, you need to calculate the net forces in only two directions. If one direction has some more force, you have a vector summation, and through some triangular law or parallelogram law of vector addition, you can find out the net force. But making the net force 0 in all the three dimensions is really difficult, and that was only possible when aerodynamics was invented. Okay, now basically aerodynamics was invented means it led us to Bernoulli theorem, where all these forces were, however, made to be balanced. Okay, Bernoulli theorem, then it was Euler theorem. Okay, it was Euler theorem, and then there were other theorems as well. The best part in this was all these theorems works on the principle of partial derivative. Okay, partial derivative, this is again very important to understand what is partial derivative. This partial derivative, if you want me to discuss, we will get back to it in the next class, because that is the most important part of the maths 2. Okay, maths 3. However, without partial derivative, it will be very difficult for you to move forward in the study of aerodynamics. Okay, so please make sure that you go through the partial derivative, that is a del operator, properly before you get back and study aerodynamics, because without getting proper del operator, del is this del, what I am saying is del, it is like this. Okay, this del is very important in study of aerodynamics. Otherwise it really becomes difficult for you. It will be very difficult for you to understand aerodynamics and solve this very, enormous shape and sizes of the questions or numericals which do appear in the exams. Now, if you can remember, we were going through some Euler's. So what I am saying is, in the continuous further videos, we'll always be dealing with different types of numericals. That is very important. I understand that numericals are the one of the most sensitive part where people find it really difficult to handle. Then we have numericals for Euler's theorem. We have numericals for Bernoulli's, which actually comes from continuity equations. So if you have any doubts regarding this, please drop me a comment. And if you find me going in a high speed, you just drop me a comment. I will be slow from the next class. However, I feel I am not high. Why I go through a better speed, because all these are continuous parameters. So if you are going slow, maybe the student gets confused. Now what is Euler? How does it depends on Bernoulli? What is del operator, and etc. However, if you have any such doubts, you just drop me a message, a comment on this on the comment box, and then we will deal with it in a better way or in a greater detail. Okay, that was for this video. I'll get back to you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.